On the news, police officer Wilbert Mora has died. He, along with his partner Jason Rivera, were ambushed responding to a domestic disturbance call in Harlem. The Archdiocese of New York is welcoming 2 new auxiliary bishops to their flock. Pope Francis appointing Father John Benici and Father Joseph Espaillat.
Fairest child of fairest mother.
And the bicentennial celebration is underway on J Street for St. James Cathedral Basilica, the first Roman Catholic church on Long Island. And nearly 80 years after the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Navy war hero is finally laid to rest. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. He sacrificed his life for New York. The second police officer who responded to a domestic disturbance call in Harlem has died. Officer Wilbert Mora joins his partner Jason Rivera now. Both will forever be remembered as heroes of the NYPD. Jessica Easthope has more.
The 32nd Precinct dealing with another loss tonight. Police Commissioner Keishant Sewell tweeted 27-year-old police officer Wilbert Mora was 3 times a hero. Quote, for choosing a life of service, for sacrificing his life to protect others, for giving life even in death through organ donation. Our heads are bowed and our hearts are heavy. Mora was taken off life support Tuesday at NYU Langone, where he was transferred to undergo surgeries for a bullet lodged in his brain. Mora was the victim of an ambush Friday night just 1 block from his precinct. He, along with 2 other officers, including 22-year-old officer Jason Rivera, who also died, were responding to a domestic dispute between a mother and son when suspect LaShawn McNeil opened fire. The NYPD said Mora fought until the very end, eventually making the ultimate sacrifice for a city Mayor Eric Adams says is struggling with crime but will overcome. In his blueprint to end gun violence, Mayor Adams vowed to put more officers on the street.
The NYPD is our first line of defense against gun violence. We will make new efforts to strengthen and reinforce it.
In a statement, Police Benevolent Association President Pat Lynch said, quote, police officer Mora showed us what it means to carry out our mission with courage, skill, and humanity. His sacrifice will guide us as we continue that mission, but we cannot succeed alone. And Diocese of Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan also sent his condolences and prayers in a statement saying in part, quote, this afternoon, New York City has lost a heroic young man who committed to make our city a safer place every day he went to work for all of us. I offer prayers for the soul of police officer Wilbert Mora, who made the ultimate sacrifice. Mora joined the department in 2018 and was a graduate of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. In Harlem, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
We are still waiting to hear the funeral arrangements for Officer Mora, but the arrangements for Officer Rivera are set for later this week. His wake will be at St. Patrick's Cathedral this Thursday, January 27th from 1 to 8 p.m. The next day, Friday, January 28th, will be his funeral mass, which begins at 9 a.m. Be sure to tune in online as Currents News will carry the funeral mass live. That's at Currents News on Facebook and Twitter. The NYPD's new head of the transit police says cops on subway platforms will keep riders safe. Uniform patrols will be the foundation of the department's effort to prevent crime underground. This comes in the wake of recent deaths of riders pushed onto train tracks. New Transit Chief Jason Wilcox says high visibility of officers is the key to protecting New Yorkers. Meanwhile, Mayor Eric Adams is defending his decision to bring plainclothes officers back to the NYPD, insisting there will be more accountability.
We're going to reinstitute an anti-gun unit where police officers will have a modified version of police uniform apparel. They're going to be better trained. We're going to use technologies with cameras to video every interaction. And I'm going to make sure the right officers are assigned there with precision policing to go after those who are dangerous gangs and carrying guns in my city.
Those officers were reassigned in 2020 when the division was disbanded amid controversy regarding its association with stop and frisk policies. That practice allowed police to temporarily detain and question people. Many said it unfairly targeted Black and Latino people. The Archdiocese is welcoming 2 new auxiliary bishops to their flock. Pope Francis appointing Father John Bonici and Father Joseph Espaillat as bishops for the Archdiocese of New York. Bishop-elect Espaillat will become one of the world's youngest bishops at 45. The New York native served as the director of youth ministry for the Archdiocese and is the current director of the Hispanic Catholic Charismatic Renewal there. Bishop-elect Bonici is also a New York native and has spent some time in the Diocese of Brooklyn. He graduated from St. John's University in Queens in 1987. Bishop-elect Bonici has served as a parish priest for 30 years and has previously worked as the director of the Archdiocese's Respect Life Office and as faculty at St. Joseph's Seminary in Dunwoody. Their ordination to the episcopacy will be on March 1st at St. Patrick's Cathedral. New York's Cardinal Timothy Dolan expressed his congratulations this morning, saying, "I look forward to working even more closely with Bishop-elect Bonici and Bishop-elect Espaillat, both experienced pastors and outstanding priests, as they undertake this new role in their priesthood." New video out now shows a group of pro-abortion protesters trying to antagonize churchgoers outside of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Members of New York City for Abortion Rights stood behind barricades and a line of police during the Archdiocese of New York's prayer vigil for life Saturday. They screamed obscenities toward people, including young children and the elderly. And at the end of the protest, the group illuminated pro-abortion sayings like "God loves abortion" on the exterior of the cathedral. The Archdiocese has not commented on the protesters. New York is appealing a ruling about its statewide mask mandate. A New York Supreme Court judge ruled that Governor Kathy Hochul's mandate can't be enforced after it was reinstituted over concerns of a winter surge of coronavirus cases. While this plays out in court, the Department of Education says that schools should continue to follow the mask rule. Some districts across the state told parents masks in classes would be optional until the appeal is decided. And following the ruling, schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn spoke out against the mandate. In a letter written by the Office of the Superintendent, they say they hope Governor Hochul's mandate will be eliminated, and they want to immediately make masks in class optional. Until that decision, the Catholic schools will be following the state mandate. A warning now from the IRS to prepare for what could be a troubling tax season. The pandemic plus a backlog of returns from last year and a worker shortage could all add up to what may be a long wait to get your refund. The IRS is in crisis, facing a backlog of close to 10 million returns.
We're working as hard as we can.
Now dealing with new staffing problems from COVID and wage competition, with nearly 200 job openings posted on their website, on top of a long list of other issues like outdated software, tedious paper filings, and most notably, a lack of sufficient funding. Since 2010, the number of tax returns is up 19%, but the agency's funding and staffing are down close to 20%.
I think it all boils down to funding.
John Koskinen was IRS commissioner under President Obama.
If you have to call or you have to respond to a notice from the IRS, that's when the problems begin.
Last year, the IRS only answered 11% of customer calls, with many waiting hours to get through. Meanwhile, tax filing is getting more complicated in the pandemic, with new programs around COVID relief and child tax credits. Traffic to the IRS website nearly tripled in 2020 and rose again last year. Now, millions of taxpayers are still waiting for their refund.
It's been frustrating.
Paul Wansing and his family need that $7,000. He's on disability and his wife runs a small business.
Knowing that it's out there and we can't access it and we could really use that money right now is a challenge.
I think it's urgent.
The Build Back Better plan would include $80 billion to strengthen the IRS. But with the bill stalled in the Senate, the White House is now calling on Congress to provide another source of stable funding.
The agency has not been equipped with the resources it needs to adequately serve taxpayers in normal times, let alone during a pandemic.
Remember, the deadline to file your taxes is April 18th, and to avoid delays this season, the IRS is urging people to file early and electronically, use direct deposit, collect all documents before starting, and make sure everything is accurate. Pope Francis has set aside Wednesday, January 26th as a day of prayer for peace for Ukraine. The Apostolic Nuncio to Ukraine says the Holy Father's appeal has been well received. He said it is important news which lifts the heart, expresses closeness and solidarity, and during times of difficulty like these in Ukraine, knowing you are not alone and forgotten is already a great help. So will diplomacy rule the day? That's the big question as Russian troops sit near the country's border with Ukraine. As Britt Conway reports, U.S. officials are hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Glimpses of day-to-day life in Ukraine as the threat of invasion looms. More than 127,000 Russian troops have amassed at the border, waiting on word from Russian President Vladimir Putin. But war began here nearly 8 years ago, when Russia annexed Crimea, which has a major port on the Black Sea. Russian-backed separatists also took control of the Donbas region, an ongoing conflict that's claimed some 13,000 lives. But with Russian troops at the border, fear that this war will escalate. As many as 8,500 U.S. troops have been put on heightened alert for a possible deployment to Eastern Europe, the Pentagon said Monday.
They'll come from bases throughout the United States, and they'll be, if they're deployed, they would deploy as part of the NATO response force.
U.S. officials say there's still room for diplomacy.
We obviously want to see that succeed, but we've also seen Vladimir Putin add to his force capability, so he has shown no signs of de-escalating, quite the contrary, and I think it's something we're all watching with great concern.
Concern and uncertainty.
Nobody knows what's in his head right now. We don't believe that he has actually made a decision for another invasion, but he is increasing his option. We want to make sure that he fully understands the consequences should he incur again. Nobody wants to see another war. Nobody wants to see another conflict. But if our NATO allies need some support, we want to make sure they know we're there for them.
I'm Britt Conway reporting.
There's a lot more news headed your way.
Sing of Jesus, Son of Mary.
St. James Cathedral Basilica, the first Roman Catholic church on Long Island, is celebrating 200 years. Plus, is the end in sight? Health experts trying to determine if we're really nearing the end of OMICRON. And later, a Navy hero from the attack on Pearl Harbor is finally brought home to his family.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
A lover of history? Well, we have a special treat for you. Buried in downtown Brooklyn is a treasure trove of amazing artifacts connected to our Catholic faith. This year marks the 200th anniversary of the first parish in the Diocese of Brooklyn, the Cathedral Basilica of St. James. A beautiful building that has quite a story. And someone who knows that story all too well is Ed Wilkinson, editor emeritus of The Tablet. And he joins us now. Ed, nice to have you here.
Christine, good to be with you.
So, Ed, it's been said that parishes are the life of the church, but St. James was actually built on top of a cemetery.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk about how that happened, and is it still there?
Yeah, well, the cemetery actually is still there, and there was an area where only Irish immigrants lived back in the early 19th century, and they had a place. They wanted a place to bury their own dead. Catholics did,
right?
And so they had this churchyard there, and they buried people there, and they moved the church of the location at one point, and it was built right over the cemetery. If you go down to the foundations, there's a crawl space. You can go underneath the cathedral and actually still see some tombstones there.
Wow.
So most of the bodies have been moved out of there and moved to Holy Cross Cemetery in Flatbush. But
I was wondering that, and I'm like, would you build something on top of that?
Yeah. Well, I think I've talked to rectors over the years, and they really don't know how many or who's down there. But there are actually tombstones underneath the cathedral there.
And these are a lot of the people that helped to build the church in the first place, right?
They were the first Catholics on Long Island, and they came and settled in the village of Brooklyn, and they used to go over to Manhattan, take a ferry over to Manhattan to go to Mass, to St. Peter's on Barclay Street. They wanted their own church, and so they petitioned the Bishop Connolly in the Archdiocese of New York, and they said, we'd like our own church, and we'd like a place where we could educate our kids and bury our dead. It was in 1822 that they finally opened St. James Church, which was the first Catholic church on all of Long Island, and only the third in New York City.
Right, because Brooklyn is part of Long Island. And
yes.
you know, we had Bishop Brennan on the show a few weeks ago. I asked him if people in the diocese should kind of take a pilgrimage over to St. James, and let's listen to what he said.
I would really encourage, and we're going to do it in a formal way. We're going to invite schools and groups and parishes and individuals to make pilgrimages to St. James, to come for Mass, to come and pray.
So as someone who has been there many times, what would you say are the top 3, can't miss artifacts for people that may go?
Well, there is so much to see down there at St. James, but the first thing you have to see when you go in there is the cathedra, which is the bishop's chair. That's the symbol of the fact that there's a sitting bishop here in this diocese, and it's got the bishops, sitting bishops, the reigning bishops, coat of arms up there, and so you have to see that designates it as a cathedral. You know right away it's a cathedral when you see the bishop's chair there.
Okay.
And so that's up on the left side. It's a very significant place. Also in the back of the church, there's an old gold mitre that belonged to Bishop MacDonald, who was the second bishop of Brooklyn.
Wow.
Yeah, back in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And then the third thing I would look at is the beautiful stained glass window. It's a commemorative window up in the front on the right that commemorates the definition of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. It's an exquisite window. It's just beautifully done. And Pope Pius IX is in there. He's the guy who proclaimed the doctrine. And those would be the 3 things, but there's many, many other things to see down there. It's a very historic place.
There's also some artifacts from St. Pope John Paul II. Talk about his relationship with the cathedral.
Well, he's the only pope to ever actually come to Brooklyn. And he visited St. James Cathedral in 1979 on his first trip to the United States. It was an unscheduled trip. He was supposed to be going from Manhattan over to Shea Stadium, and they made a detour. They came off the
surprise visit.
Yeah. Nobody really was aware of it. It was just a call at the line, and he visited. It was pouring rain that day, pouring rain, and he pulled up in his limousine, and he actually got out of the car in the pouring rain, and the only pope to ever walk the streets of Brooklyn.
Right.
He didn't go into the cathedral, but he went over and he said hello to all the people there, and so that was the papal visit. And there's a beautiful plaque down there on the outside of the cathedral that commemorates that visit.
How exciting. So big celebrations all year long. Ed Wilkinson, editor emeritus of The Tablet, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Good to see you, Christy.
And no one knows the parishes of the Diocese of Brooklyn better than Ed Wilkinson. And on Thursday, we're going to kick off a new series that highlights some of those parishes and the parishioners who make them special. From Ridgewood, Queens to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, you'll hear stories from people at the heart of their church's ministry. People like Lily and her mom, Maretza, who run the St. Matthias Food Pantry. Auxiliary Bishop Neil Tiedemann says they're key to the pantry's success.
Maritza and Lily had been long-time parishioners in the parish. What they did is they gathered together a team that would be able to work with this. It's a parish-based organization where we keep things going. They actually call up the people ahead of time to set up kind of appointments, so everybody has the hours that they would come, and then there would be a team that sets this all up.
Parishioners from all over the Diocese of Brooklyn putting their faith into action through their parishes. Tune in for our very first Pulse of the Parish this Thursday at 7 on Currents News. Could we be nearing the end of OMICRON? That's the question many pharmaceutical companies are trying to answer. Both Pfizer and BioNTech have begun clinical trials for an OMICRON-specific COVID vaccine. The companies say they're studying the safety, tolerability, and level of immune response in 1,400 healthy adults ranging in ages 18 to 55. Despite this, Pfizer says people who got the booster already have a high level of protection against OMICRON. Meanwhile, dozens of offensive anti-Semitic flyers were found in San Francisco over the weekend, blaming Jewish people for the, quote, COVID agenda. Liz Kreutz reports.
There were quite a few just littered throughout the sidewalk.
In San Francisco's Pacific Heights, residents are dismayed and on edge after finding disturbing anti-Semitic flyers placed all around their neighborhood.
It was a small plastic sandwich baggie weighted down with some rice, and it had a flyer that said the entire COVID agenda is Jewish.
Aurora, who is Jewish and asked we not share her last name, noticed the offensive flyers while on a walk Sunday morning. She picked up several scattered along Pacific Avenue near Baker Street. Others reported seeing them outside homes on Union Street.
These flyers are placed at a time when there's already unrest in Jewish communities following that recent hostage situation at a synagogue in Texas and an overall rise in anti-Semitism.
Nationally, ADL reported over 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents in 2020. That is the third highest tally that we've recorded since we have tracked it in 1979.
The ADL says they are aware of the group behind these flyers. They say it's a loosely organized extremist group that espouses vitriolic anti-Semitism and white supremacist themes online. The leader is based in Sonoma County. The ADL asks anyone who finds flyers from this group to report it.
We want to make sure that law enforcement investigates and gets to the bottom of exactly what was going on.
The fact of the matter is that, like, whether it's coming from outside or from within our city, Jewish people here are still being intimidated.
That was Liz Kreutz reporting. Apart from California, the Anti-Defamation League says these flyers were also found in several other states over the weekend, including Texas, Colorado, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Florida. Still to come on Currents News, relics from the past causing a future threat, why the FBI is on the case in one state. And this. Nearly 80 years after the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Navy war hero is finally laid to rest. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Interesting news out of Missouri. Law enforcement there have been calling for caution around cannonballs. That, as well as mines and grenades from wars in the past. It comes as more and more people in the Show Me states say they've been finding the leftover military ordnances around their properties. And now a federal bomb squad is on the job, clearing out any forgotten munitions in Missouri until the end of the week.
And as time passes, these items become less chemically stable, making them a public safety concern.
These are munitions that are designed to kill people. That's pretty much their sole purpose. And that's what we're trying to stop.
Those who discover any explosives on their property are instructed not to move, touch, handle, or transport them. The task force made clear that the effort is not designed to gather evidence or to prosecute people, but rather to ensure public safety. For years, the USS Oklahoma project has been working to identify the hundreds of service members who died at Pearl Harbor. And now, nearly 80 years after the attack, their efforts are yielding results. As Alicia Barrera reports, one Navy war hero has finally been laid to rest closer to his family in San Antonio.
Navy Fireman First Class Frank Nichols was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin in January of 1917.
He enlisted actually 82 years ago today in the Navy, and he was assigned 2 months later to the USS Oklahoma. His younger brother actually joined at 17, and I guess he probably asked to be assigned to the same ship.
On December 7th, 1941, an attack on the USS Oklahoma in Pearl Harbor left 429 service members dead. While his younger brother survived, Nichols did not. His remains would then be buried as unknown in the Punchbowl National Cemetery in Honolulu, Hawaii.
And it was in 2016 that all the remains of the USS Oklahoma service members were finally identified thanks to the Defense Prisoner of War Missing in Action Accounting Agency. And it was then that the family of Frank Nichols knew that he needed to be closer to them in order to heal and honor the war hero.
His remains finally arrived on Friday to the San Antonio International Airport, thanks in part to the help of Mission Park Funeral and a petition from the family who lives in Austin.
We had long ago given up any thought of that happening.
Christopher was only 5 months old when his cousin died, and today he, along with other family, get a chance to salute Nichols.
I'm very pleased to see it.
That was Alicia Barrera reporting an incredible story. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.